In the words of Dunder Mifflin executive Michael Scott, well, 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 how the turntables. Here we go. Look at this headline, folks. US SEC greenlights ProShares XRP futures ETFs for April 30th launch. How the turntables indeed. Our arch nemesis, the SEC, now be like, yeah, you're fine, do your XRP stuff. Okay, I'll take it. It's under a new administration. And so the SEC has approved 3 XRP ETFs from ProShares. They're all leveraged rather than spot, but still, the SEC itself has approved them. That's a very good sign, obviously, okay? And it's not unexpected. You know, now that the war on crypto is over in the United States, you know what comes after this, though, right? It's the one we really want. Spot XRP ETFs. That's the big one, and it's coming. Probably later this year. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. I gotta ask you, does it seem to you like there's been, I don't know, I guess like a really high volume of XRP ETF news lately? If it seems that way, that's because it has been that way. Just to set the table here, I want to make sure everybody's aware of what the hell has been happening here. It's like I have to put out a new XRP ETF video every day lately, it feels like. Here's one headline from CoinDesk. And this is from April 10th. First XRP ETF in United States racks up $5 million on debut in Ethereum's most successful launch. And this was frankly pretty incredible. I'm not going to go in depth, setting the table here again, because I've talked about this at length, but here's a key takeaway. And this is another leveraged ETF here, first in the US though. Ethereum's 2x long daily XRP ETF debuted with $5 million in trading volume, ranking it among the top 5% of new ETF launches. Now folks, that doesn't mean top 5% for this company. It's the top 5% blanket statement of ETF launches. And it's XRP. And not only is it XRP, like it's already up there in the top 5%. That's without it being a spot XRP ETF in the United States, already in the top 5%. I think it's safe to say that there's a lot of interest in XRP. So if you're like me and you've thought XRP just made a whole ton of sense for years and years and years, you're in good company here. You're not the only one that thinks that. Here's another one. This headline here, and I covered this in depth. I'll be very brief here. I just wanted to point this out. This is the headline from Bitcoinist of all places. XRP is the coin with the most utility, and that's a quote, the most utility, says Ethereum CEO. So that's the guy whose firm launched that ETF that I just cited here. And he was confronted by, I wouldn't say a combative Bloomberg host on national television, but this was on national television. But this host said XRP doesn't have any utility. It's just something that people speculate on. And he came back hard. And I shared the transcription in a separate video. I won't do it here. But he's like, no. And he went on at length why that's not true. And XRP actually has real world utility. And he focused pretty heavily on the fact that you can tokenize assets on the XRP ledger. It was just nice to see that somebody fight back vigorously and not on some script. He just like, he knows what he knows. And he's like, no. He's like, no, shut your damn mouth. Here are the actual facts. It's just nice to see that. And we are right here. Obviously, that's just one thing. There are so many use cases for XRP. And then we had this the other day. This one's from Crypto Briefing. First ever XRP spot ETF debuts on Brazil's main stock exchange. And so this is the first, literally the first ever XRP ETF that is spot. And so it's backed by actual ETF, or by actual XRP rather. And that's a big deal. And so, you know, I'm in the United States. I would have preferred it be in the US, but you know what? My country was fucking shit up for like the last 4 years, so here we are. But finally, new administration coming in. I believe that will be worked out. We're going to have a ton of XRP spot ETFs by the end of this year, I believe. I think that's by a lot what is most probable here. But I'd love to see this. Look at all this stuff being built around the XRP ecosystem. And so even for these other ETFs, which are leveraged, rather than just being based on, you know, spot, like, I'm not going to use them. Some people, a lot of people obviously want to use them. That's good for the XRP ecosystem, even if not backed by XRP. Even if the contracts themselves aren't purchased or settled with XRP, it's more of a plus than a minus, unquestionably, because it's bringing people awareness of XRP, even if that were the only reason. And there's people that are going to learn about it who then might purchase XRP spot. So just saying here, it's obviously a good thing. Now, as far as the specifics of this one, headline here from CryptoSlate, US SEC greenlights ProShares XRP futures ETFs for April 30th launch. Folks, this is right around the corner here. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, arch nemesis previously, has approved the launch of 3 XRP futures-based exchange-traded funds by ProShares Trust on April 30th, and SEC filing shows. On January 17th, days before the now crypto-friendly President Donald Trump was inaugurated, ProShares had proposed the following ETFs: an Ultra XRP ETF, which provides 2x leverage, a Short XRP ETF, which will provide inverse -1 leverage, Ultra Short XRP ETF, which will provide inverse -2x leverage. Okay, this should only be used by professionals, but it's going to be used by regular people too, and they're probably going to get freaking wrecked. Because here's the thing, XRP, I believe anyway, my personal opinion, on the whole will continue to trend up. So if you're always voting short, that's your bet, you're going to have a bad time eventually. Even if you're right in the short term, you're going to have a bad time. But I still want these investment vehicles to be available because this is the stuff that exists in traditional finance. It still brings attention to what's happening, and spot rules all. Like ultimately, big picture, absolutely what happens in spot, real supply and demand based on XRP, what's available from people who are interested in buying something. Like that's what actually matters here. And so let everything else evolve around it. That's fine. And what you'll find is that, well, so like the professionals, the true professionals, obviously, they're only going to, it doesn't mean that they hate XRP necessarily. Like they're just betting against it for a particular period of time. All I'm saying is that if you had to pick Ultra XRP ETF, which would be a 2x leverage, or Short XRP ETF, if you could only pick one of those two, what would you pick? If you had to consistently purchase one or the other, I'd say Ultra XRP ETF because the price trends upward. Even so, I'm just saying, I'm happy that it's available to be purchased. People should be able to wreck themselves. You know, we're all adults. If you want to make some piss poor decisions, have at it. Anyway, piece continues. These will be the second, third, and fourth XRP-related ETFs to be launched in the U.S. on April 8th. The first, I said that with a weird cadence, on April 8th, which is a separate sentence. The reason I did that is because U.S. U.S. And I should have got it because the O is capitalized. I'm just saying, I thought that it was the continuation of the sentence. Anyway, so separate sentence, on April 8th, the first XRP futures ETF by Teucrium started trading at the New York Stock Exchange and saw a terrific response. And that's obvious. I just highlighted that. One of the top performing new ETFs ever, literally. And then they go on to cite what I was just talking about right here. It is important to note, however, that a futures-based ETF provides exposure to the price movements of XRP futures contracts. In other words, ProShares ETFs will track the price of XRP through the XRP index. This means that, unlike a spot ETF, which would require buying XRP tokens, a futures XRP ETF allows placing bets on XRP's price without holding the token itself, right? But again, do you think the SEC under Kim Jong-Gensler would have been like, yeah, we should let the people do this? No, we have more freedom and more investment vehicles than we would have had this election gone a different way here. This is great for freedom of choice. It's great for the XRP ecosystem, unquestionably. I'm emphatic about that. I feel very strongly about this. But since this happened, the key takeaway is that, and again, that's why this shouldn't be surprising, now that the entire government from the top on down, from Trump on down, is pro-crypto, that does mean we will absolutely have a ton of XRP spot ETFs. I think it's a virtual certainty they're going to come this year. It could be towards the tail end of this year. I don't pretend to know when, but a lot of people who understand, like, you know, the processes behind the scenes, what it takes to get these things going, do think that. I'll yield to their sage wisdom, but still, it's coming then. And this is something that, look, it's not something that is going to be heavily swaying the price of XRP. Like, say they were even live right now, like today. It's not something I believe that would heavily sway the price action for XRP this market cycle, but over a span of years and decades, oh yeah, hot damn. It's hard to overstate the degree to which more money flows in increasing demand for XRP than if those investment vehicles don't exist. Because there's always going to be a subset of people who are not like you and I, who don't want to buy XRP itself on Coinbase or whatever the exchange is, and don't want to learn how to self-custody, and maybe they don't even want that risk. Different people are willing to take on different risks. Some people just want to have their assets held by a central authority, and that's fine. If people let people do what they want is the point. But that's why if you just open it up so people can at least get some freaking exposure, yeah, over a long period of time, way more money flows in. You're just super early to the party. You are if you're buying XRP in 2025, you're still early. And XRP's been around over a decade. You're still early. I firmly believe that. The utility just keeps increasing. To me, it just couldn't be more freaking obvious. XRP is an early winner in the crypto space, and that is that. In fact, look at crypto metrics here. Look at the number of new accounts activated. I haven't updated this on the channel in a while. On any given day, most days, over 3,000 new accounts being created. And this is at a time of fear, allegedly, right? For most of the last month or two in particular, over 3,000 new accounts per day, still on most days. You go back a year ago, you get like what, 700, 800, 900, 1,000 new accounts per day, sometimes a little bit higher than that. If roughly 3,000 new accounts per day is the new norm, hot damn, that's freaking great. Do you see how much more attention is on XRP than was even a year ago? You're early. Do you recognize the specialness of this? You get this, right? You beat almost everyone on the planet to XRP. Look at the rich list here, highlighting that the number of new XRP wallets is now over 6.4 million. It's just wild to see. You know, in late 2017, before XRP went ballistic in December, there were less than 700,000 accounts. In 2.5 weeks, it jumped up to over 1 million, and then that was the euphoria, so obviously a ton of new accounts, but then it slowed down dramatically. And ever since then, we've just been climbing up. And you can see it kind of substantially increased in November, obviously. If you're looking at the screen, you can see what I'm talking about here. But look at that pitch. Like, if you got eyeballs, even just one of them, like, you can see that. Oh, it's just wild. Like, what a time to be an XRP holder. If you're not excited, I think that you're on the other side of the dirt. That's the only way that could possibly make sense, honestly. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.